Salutes to the real ones. It's your boy back again for another informative conversation. But I want to see something real quick. I want to see if I could put this jam on it on while I listen to this. While you guys listen to this, this is just gonna be something for me in the background. I know y'all don't really care about music like that. Yeah, I'm out here, man, just chilling. Sp- Yeah, powwow. Nah, ain't no powwow, my boy. Library radio library. Man, ain't this update fucked up everything, man, when it comes to this shit with the music on the iPhone. Now I can't even access old shit. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there. I got some shit I want to talk about when it comes to this way of life we have, man. And one of the biggest misconception is that we make each other sick. That shit's bogus as hell, man. And I'm gonna share something with y'all so y'all can understand what I'm talking about. And it's not gonna be me saying it. This is gonna be stuff that's being spoken off of the internet. That this is like widely known scientific information. So fair use. I'm not the one saying it. I'm not giving no medical advice. I'm just gonna be commentating on stuff and giving my opinion. But yeah, fair use, man. And then you guys get to watch the lovely sunset with me as I chill and talk about this crap. So sit a spell, man. Sit a spell and hang out with your boy and have a conversation. So how all this came about was, I always be researching shit for new videos and stuff like that. And I came across this what was it? I came across this document that had a lot of information on parasites and their links to illness and shit. So I started reading, and it took me about 4 or 5 hours to finish reading all of this stuff. Cause like every good researcher, I went back, cross-referenced some stuff, looked at some stuff, wanted to make sure I had understanding of what I was reading. And from what I got from this was salutes Eustace. What I got from this is that a lot of stuff that we believe as fact is just theory that's supported by a consensus. What I mean by that is the theories that they're saying are fact. It's just like anything we have problems with explaining, like let's say the sun, the moon. All of those are theories, but they've been widely accepted as theoretical fact. Same thing with everything science pretty much tries to prove to the human that is reality. Evolution, the cosmos and all that shit. All of that stuff is theoretical fact. Now, just because I'm saying fact at the end doesn't mean it's not a theory. And with that comes this with the parasites. So some parasites have been linked to an increased risk of cancer in humans. There's a few of them that are widely known, scientifically researched. I'm not going to say factual or proven or nothing like that, because the way they explain it, it's like a constant ongoing, you know, uh, research. So since it's constant and it's ongoing research, that means that we can't really put a foundation to what they're actually researching. Meaning that if someone comes along with more evidence, then their evidence could be considered scientific fact. Salutes, DJ Overtime, Extra, salutes, man. Hit that like button when you come in, please. But yeah, man, it says that it's all theory. And which, if it's all theory, then how can we believe this stuff? How can we put ourselves in jeopardy based on a theory? See, because they don't want us to know how this works. Says something, I'm going to read you a portion of it. If researchers employ various methods to study a virus, but do not discover the definitive origin, like where it's from, they may still identify a primary origin based on the best available evidence and hypothesis. This is was tripping me out. That it's not based off of fact, it's based off of a theory and evidence that derive from a theory, which is a hypothesis, which is taking literally as being fact. And that's not how things supposed to work. It says a primary origin may be identified based on the best available evidence and information from informed hypothesis, even if a definitive origin is not discovered. So this conversation was about where does parasites come from? And they don't know where they come from. But some of the theories have been accepted that parasites come from humans, animals, and plants. But they don't know for sure because they haven't figured out how to prove it. But there's also theories that, and this is from other sources other than the scientific community, that parasites and bacteria come from the soil. They don't want to accept that. Matter of fact, they go through great lengths to dispel it. They go to no, they go to great lengths to dispel it because I asked AI about this conversation, and since AI has all the literature from the past 20 years on the subject, I'm assuming that they're going to quote what the scientific community says. It says, I asked the question like this. In turn, my hypothesis displays the evidence it formed. It's from a primary origin as well. So, can the same thing be said about parasites' origins as well? Because I was asking the question like, if they can prove that parasites are in a location by large volumes, then they can also prove that they came from that location where large numbers of them reside. And they told me, yes, your hypothesis about the potential parasite origin can be considered valid in the context of scientific inquiry, especially if you can present evidence or reasoning that supports it. And that's why I brought up the conversation about finding large numbers of these things, right? But it also says in summary, if your hypothesis about parasite origins is supported by evidence, it can be considered a valid perspective in the scientific discussion about viruses' origins. And this is viruses and parasites. But see, the thing is that they don't consider the two the same. They consider viruses an entity, but not an organism, which kind of is confusing at the same time. But they have scientific consensus that states this fact that it's not an organism, it's an entity. So take that how you want. But the exploration of such hypothesis is an important part of scientific inquiry and can lead to new insight and understanding, which I don't know why this haven't been theorized before in the scientific community and then researched heavily that parasites come from the soil and viruses do in turn as well. So why they're not doing that? It's because they have figured out that if they say it long enough and loud enough, it's the truth. You know, I conversated more with this AI and I asked it questions to prove my hypothesis. Questions like this: can all parasites carry viruses? And if so, does carrying a virus be considered a link between viruses and humans because humans are able to contract all parasites? If that's the case, I thought that was a good question. But you know what AI did? It came back and gave me an alternative. Not all parasites can carry viruses. Really? So all parasites can't carry viruses. Why is that? I mean, if a parasite is a organism and a virus is a entity, then all organisms can contract entities. But it said, and the relationship between parasites and viruses and humans is complex, which means that it's too complicated to just say that viruses come from parasites and parasites infect humans. Hence, viruses come from parasites. If viruses are contracted by humans and humans catch viruses from parasites, wouldn't it be smart to say that viruses come from parasites? If that's the only way humans can come in contact with these things. So this is what they said, or this is what the AI said. Not all parasites carry viruses. While some parasites can carry viruses, many do not. Parasites can be bacteria, protozoa, helminth, which is worms, and arthropods, like mosquitoes and ticks. And their ability to carry viruses varies widely depending on the species. If that's the case, then how can't every parasite carry a virus? If you're naming off all of these, the protozoas, the bacterias, the helminths, which are worms, and the arthropod, which is mosquitoes, there's not too many other things besides that. You know what I'm saying? Other than animals, mammals, reptiles, and shit like that. So if they're not coming from these lesser entities like parasites, worms, and arthropods, insects, and ticks, which are parasites themselves, then where are they coming from? And this is where I came with the question is that why aren't parasites original origin described as the soil? And since they come in contact with the soil and viruses are found in the soil, wouldn't you expect that all of the parasites and viruses come from soil? Well, this is a question that was asked by, or that was asked, and I repeated the question. The question was this: so scientists say 99% of all viruses come from direct contact with parasites. So if some come compared to others, if some of them come from parasites compared to others, the consensus is the same. Parasites can and do transmit viruses as well as bacteria. And ChatGPT couldn't answer it. It didn't answer it. Matter of fact, ChatGPT straight up ended my session with the 4.1. And so I had to go to another AI and ask that question. And it was a question that was asked online by, someone that's questioning a scientist. And it said the statement that 99% of all viruses come from direct contact with parasites is not a widely accepted scientific consensus and may be oversimplification. Wait a minute. It's not a widely, accepted scientific consensus, but it is an accepted scientific consensus. So this is what I found out. Scientific consensuses are like groups of scientists that are considered experts in their field, right? The ones that are located in virology all get together and come up with ideas on what viruses and parasites are based off of their learnings. Well, since they can't prove any of that, they have to agree up on a what? A theory that sounds good, that makes sense. And they call those theoretical, right? Theoretical facts. And then, in order for the theoretical fact to become a consensus, they have to take a vote on whether or not that's the best answer for the question. Salute, Drama Free. Yeah, so they are voting on whether or not a guess is the best answer for a question. It's like you have a group, it's almost like a multiple choice question, but you got people voting on which answer is the best. And out of the answers, let's say the question is, what's 2 plus 5, right? Is it 4, 3, 14, or 7, right? Well, they'll vote on what the best answer is, even if they don't know the answer. So let's say they eliminated all the answers and they came out with 14. I know, it should have been 7, but they came up with 14. Well, since they can't prove that 5 plus 2 is 7, they get as close as they can to a logical answer. And then the consensus is they all vote on whether or not they agree, not whether or not it's the right answer, whether or not they agree, because that's what a consensus is, an agreement amongst their peers. So we're following instructions from people that don't find facts, only theories. And then they agree and vote up on those theories. And this right here is coming straight from peer review information stored on AI and is now available to us through the internet. So it says that, in summary, while some parasites can transmit viruses, it is not accurate to claim that the vast majority of viruses come from direct contact with parasites. The origins and transmissions of viruses are complex and involve a variety of hosts and mechanisms. So just because it involves a just because they researched it and they came up with different ways that these parasites and viruses come in contact with humans, they've come to the conclusion that it's not as simple as the ground you're walking on is where these things reside and you should be watching out for it. No, they came up with an answer that states that, hey, just because you think or we find evidence that these things come from the soil, that doesn't mean that that's the definitive answer. And we shouldn't claim that until we have a definitive answer. But all of their answers came from theorized scientific consensus and then voted upon by the individuals who theorized on it on which theory is more accurate. Not which theory is true, but more accurate. Which makes no sense to me. Because when you look at and think about all of the different ways people get sick, the ones that they really harp on are ones that are transmitted from animals and from humans. But if animals and humans got them from the same place, but you haven't theorized enough or researched enough to find out where that place is, can you necessarily say that it comes from humans? No, you can't. No, you can't. And most people are claiming that this is a fact, that diseases and viruses are transmitted through humans and animals only. And that's not the case. It's gonna Once people start researching this stuff and finding out that most of it is decided upon by, educated guesses, they'll realize that the people that's telling them this stuff have no clue that they're still theorizing. And that's the formulation of science, though. That's how science works. Until you definitively find something out that works, like at one time, automobiles or combustible engines were a theory, and scientists researched it. And then there was an inventor that came along and created it under that theory and proved it through works. And then it no longer was a question on whether combustible engines were possible. Because before they actually experimented and found out, it was imaginary. It was all in the inventor's mind, which means that he didn't know if what he drew on that paper and what he wrote about was actually gonna work until he did the work. So are these scientists doing the work with viruses, with virology? Because if they were, they would realize that you can grab dirt and soil from the ground and look at it under a microscope and find the same bacteria and viruses that are plaguing people to this day. And then that would be definitive proof that the way they got there was because they were already there in the beginning, in the ground. Just like we live on the surface of the ground, there are things that live under the surface of the ground. Same thing with water. There's things that live in the water because it's in contact with the surface of the ground. And see, most of these entities that they're talking about in the form of viruses, right, only can survive in the host and replicate in the host. And that's usually plants and animals. So I looked this up. I looked up something that dealt with the type of things that are inflicted. So I asked the question, I said, is water and soil interconnected? And the AI said, certainly. Here's a more detailed explanation. The water cycle is part of the Earth's hydro hydrological system. Hydrological system. I think that's how you say it. Hydrological system, which includes processes like evaporation, condensation, precipitation, and infiltration. Right? While water can be found in soil as moisture, it is not accurate to say that water itself is soil based. Instead, soil and water interact in various ways. The origin of life, the earliest forms are believed to have originated in aquatic environments such as oceans and lakes. These environments provide necessary conditions for the development of simple single cell organisms. Hmm, would that simple single cell organism be considered an entity, which is also considered a virus? Well, they've come to that conclusion. While water is essentially for life and interacts with soil, the earliest organisms are thought to have originated in water rather than directly from soil. The relationship between water and soil is important in understanding ecosystems, but they represent different components of the environment, right? So I asked the question again. So what water and soil? So if water and soil is interconnected, then as water organisms absorb into the soil, they become land organisms, which if the water dries up, the organism must adapt to dry environments, which will make their origin the soil. right? I know that's a mouthful, but listen to what this AI said, right? Yes, if water organisms adapt to dry soil environment, they can evolve into land organisms. So their origin can be linked to the soil as they transition from water to land. Now, see, anytime they say evolve, right, they're actually talking about an adaptation. And that's why I said in my comment that they would have to adapt to the dry land. But see, since AI has been taught by all of the documents online, it has a problem with determining if something is a lie or if something is not true. So it says if water organisms adapt to dry soil environment, they can evolve into land organisms. And I said, but if the host is a water-based organisms like humans are, 80% water, then viruses can and do survive in water based on environments as well as soil-based environments due to the fact that humans also contain minerals as soil. And this is what the AI said to me. Viruses can survive in water-based environments. Hold on, right? Water-based environment is like saying water and mud. It's like a base, right? So they can survive in that and may be present in soil, but their origins are not solely linked to these environments. They typically evolve from specific hosts. So how can something that becomes a host, that means it wasn't originally there in the first place, because a host is something that attaches, that can be attached to. Like a host is like your cell phone. When you're talking on the phone, your cell phone is a host of you. That means that through the phone, your voice can be heard and you can communicate to somebody. Just like when you host a party, you're there as someone that is like in exchange of something. So as the host, all your guests come and you greet them, you know what I'm saying? And you tell them, come on in. You're like the presenter of all this shit. You know what I'm saying? So it says viruses can survive in water-based environments and may be present in the soil. Yes, if humans come in contact with viruses. So this question I asked after that, right? It says that they typically evolve from the host, from specific hosts, not directly from the soil or water. Okay? But I said, if humans come in contact with these viruses in the soil or water, will they contract them? Yes. If humans come in contact with the viruses present in contaminated, see how they put contaminated? Present in contaminated soil or water, there is a possibility of contracting these viruses depending on the type of the virus and the mode of transmission. Proper hygiene and sanitation are important to reduce this risk. Didn't ask all of that, but you see how they had the AI had to put contaminated as if someone else came along or something else came along and put it there. Hence, reporting back to the to the to the host. What's up, Divinity Brent? Salutes. Thank you guys for hitting the like button when you come in. Well, so I was questioning this more because I was intrigued. I wanted to find out whether or not I can get a definitive answer from this AI. But I found out that there were some things that you cannot do that were already set in place, or undo that were already set in place. It says, I asked him, as of today, what does the consensus state about the origin of viruses? And he said, as of today, the consensus among scientists is that viruses likely have diverse origins, not necessarily, don't know what exactly it is, often evolving from genetic elements like living organisms. So, evolving from living elements or organisms. They may have originated from cellular hosts, zoonotic sources, which is many viruses that affect humans or infect humans, right? Cellular host is some viruses are thought to have evolved from the genetic material of bacteria, all right? Then there's mobile genetic elements. Some theories suggest that viruses may have evolved from mobile genetic elements, such as plasmids and transponsons that gain the ability to infect cells. So these single cell entities gain the ability to infect cells, but still, they had to have gotten into the host from somewhere. Overall, while there are various hypotheses about the origins of viruses, there is no single definitive answer, and research continues to explore these complex relationships. So, if there's no definitive answers, that means that it's still up in the air. How are they able to create cures for it or deterrence from it? If you know that good hygiene and washing your hand prevents you from catching viruses, then why do you have to wash your hands? Wouldn't the dirt on your hands have nothing to do with a virus? Wouldn't poor hygiene have nothing to do with a virus if it has nothing to do with the earth, with the soil? Because most people get their hands dirty from working in the dirt. You don't usually get your hands dirty from, just having them in your pockets. So what they're telling us is to overlook the fact is that these things reside in the soil and can live in the soil and the water that's in contact with the soil, but we're not going to recognize that, then they also can be contracted through walking on contaminated soil. So just walking on contaminated soil is enough. But they don't tell you in what uh, condition walking on that contaminated soil has to be. So check it out. You know how everybody's saying, take your shoes off and go ground yourself? When we were kids, we used to play outside with our bare feet all the time in the dirt. And we used to always get sick every season. In the summertime, organisms are more active because they're no longer hibernating because of the cold. Well, when you go out in the summertime, most people go swimming in the lakes and the ponds and the rivers and go walking around and playing in the dirt and shit like that. And this is how we're contracting most of these organisms. They don't tell you that people contract organisms through the soles of their feet. They don't tell you this because if they did, then you would prevent your children from going outside and playing in the dirt barefoot or just playing in the dirt, period. There's a couple parasites, right, that get into your system just by wading through the water. One of them is very prominent and known to cause symptoms allegedly related to cancer, right? It's the schistosomia, right? It's a parasite worm that actually it houses the male and female in one body. All right. So these parasite worms is associated with urinary tract infections and has been linked to bladder cancer, particularly in regions where the infection is epidemic or endemic. My bad. So in places where there is uh, contaminated water, and I don't see why they use that word contaminated when they should say untreated water or unsterile water. Because we get treated water from the city water. It's not distilled anymore. So these parasites can live in fresh water. And there's diagrams if you look these things up. That word that I just said, that soma, that schistosoma, schistosoma. These are just a common thing in all water that's been in contact with the ground. Lakes, rivers. You see what I'm saying? These things exist in that water at high numbers. And I'm not talking about by the hundreds. I'm talking about by the trillions. And this is how we get infected from some of this stuff. So did you know that this parasite also is related to the spiral worm that we know as syphilis? So a lot of these symptoms that people were getting and that they thought were being transmitted through some other means could have been transmitted through the soil, through the water, straight into your bloodstream. These worms can burrow through your skin. A lot of people over in third world countries where people wear no shoes all day, they get these worms in their feet that have to be fished out by a certain type of oil, and they roll the worm on a string, on a stick, or on a pick, and that's how they get it out of the skin. They they coerce the worm out of the skin with oil, right? And the worm comes out of the skin to prevent itself from being in contact with the oil. And then they wrap the worm around the pick and they twist it until the worm completely comes out of the skin. If they didn't do that, the worm would never come out. And sometimes these worms are like 13 inches long. On the average, the worms are at least 5 inches long. 5 inches long. And that's just the ones that come to the surface. The ones that are embedded into your tissues, they don't have to come to the surface because they're so deep into the skin and into the muscle tissues that they don't. And they cause things like let me see some of the things that they cause. The ones that are in your feet. All right. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, this shit is crazy, man. Because a lot of people are thinking that this stuff is just uh it doesn't really have anything to do with the ground. We think that anything from the earth, anything from the dirt is natural. Yes, it is. But just because it's natural don't mean it's not dangerous. And this is why a lot of people have become, you know, paranoid about the outdoors, and why we created certain things to prevent us from coming in direct contact with it. Let me see if I can find this what it says about this disease, this worm, schistosomyiasis, I think. Schistosomyiasis. SCIHSCHI. Want to make sure I get the right one. IS. Yep. All right, here we go. Says schistosomyiasis, also known as snail fever, right, is a disease caused by parasitic worms called schistosomiasis. Its effect It affects the urinary tract and the intestines. Symptoms include abdominal pain, diarrhea, bloody stool, or blood in the urine. Now, how is it caused, or how do they get infected? All right. And there's videos on YouTube about it. If you go on YouTube and you type in schistosomiasis causes and symptoms, it'll tell you. All right. It says over 200 million people worldwide are infected every year. I say, while schistosomiasis is prevalent in the U.S., you can become contaminated if you come into contact with infected water while outside of the country. It's not just outside of the country. If it's infected water and nobody infected it, which means it occurred naturally, then that means that all water is contaminated with this shit. All right? And coming in contact with contaminated water isn't just you ingesting it. No, just walking through the water. There's little diagrams that show people about this. Just walking, wading through the water, because you have pores in the bottom of your feet. That's why your feet sweat, right? And these little microscopic worms will get into those pores and burrow through the hair follicles and get into your muscle and your skin tissues, and then eventually get into your bloodstream. But this is because people don't clean themselves on a daily basis, and they continuously contaminate themselves, in my opinion. This is just my opinion, allegedly, you know. But you can also get this. You can also get this from animals that have done the same thing as you, and also from vegetables. Now, the part about the vegetables, right? The part about the vegetables, let me see if I can get this, because I found this information too, because I wanted to find out how the hell is this stuff happening on such a scale. Mm-mm. God damn it. Let me see if I can find it. See, now I'm having issues finding my shit document. When you wanna be authentic and get your shit from there. Yeah, it's what happens. Uh, up from uh from these worms. So let me see. One